Something extraordinary just happened inside the House of Commons, and it went largely unnoticed by the mainstream press. A Prime Minister, facing one of the most serious accountability questions in modern British political memory, chose not to answer it. Instead, he reached for something else entirely, a deflection so sharp, so calculated, that it actually backfired in real time, right there on the floor of Parliament. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. A sitting MP immediately rose to formally accuse him of misleading the House. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't confusion. This was a choice. And that choice tells you everything about how this government is managing one of the most sensitive and painful issues in British public life. Watch this carefully, because what Keir Starmer actually says matters far less than what he deliberately avoids saying. And then watch what happens next, because that's where this moment quietly becomes something much bigger.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The government's proposed terms of reference for the inquiry into rape and grooming gangs are fatally flawed, as victims and survivors have pointed out. They won't address the role that race and religion played in motivating these crimes. They won't lead to prosecutions for those involved in the cover-up. And they won't even investigate all cases, only a select few. The consultation on these terms ends this Friday. If enough people call for changes, including through groomingangjustice.uk, will the Prime Minister please assure us that the final terms of reference will reflect these concerns?
Forgive me if I don't take suggestions from the honourable member who said people legally and settled here should go home to ensure that the UK is culturally coherent. That is a grotesque way to talk about our friends and neighbours, and I rather suspect that her next question will come from her sitting up there.
Sullivan. Point forward to Katie Lamb.
The Prime Minister has On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I believe the Prime Minister has inadvertently misled the House. I seek your guidance on how to get him to correct the record for claiming I said something I in fact did not.
We can't continue the debate. What I can say is quite rightly, you've put your view down, but I'm not responsible for the Prime Minister's answers. If inadvertently it wasn't right, it is up to the individual to correct it.
Let's be precise about what just happened, because the surface reading and the political reality are two very different things. An MP raised serious, structured concerns about the government's proposed terms of reference for the grooming gangs inquiry. Not emotionally, not vaguely. She pointed to three specific failures: the exclusion of race and religion as motivating factors, the absence of accountability for those involved in cover-ups, and the restriction of cases under investigation. These are not fringe objections, they are the concerns of survivors themselves. And Keir Starmer's response? He didn't address a single one. Instead, he chose to attack the MP's character using a prior statement, effectively telling the House, "I won't engage with this question because of who is asking it." That is not governance, that is gatekeeping, and it's a strategy this government has used before on this exact issue, discrediting the messenger to avoid confronting the message. But here's where it unravelled. The quote Starmer attributed to that MP? She says she never said it, and she was confident enough to rise on a point of order, formally, on the record, and accuse the Prime Minister of inadvertently misleading the House. That is a rare and serious moment. Points of order are not grandstanding. They are procedural interventions that go into the parliamentary record permanently. The Speaker predictably deflected, noting he cannot control a Prime Minister's answers. But that non-answer from the chair is itself revealing. It places the burden of correction entirely on Starmer himself, and so far he has not corrected it. Here's the deeper strategic reality. This government has consistently framed opposition to its inquiry terms as politically motivated or culturally divisive. By attacking the question as past rhetoric, Starmer attempted to make the story about her, not about the victims. It's a classic repositioning move. Muddy the water around the critic, and the criticism gets lost in the noise. But the problem with that strategy, when it's built on a misquotation, is that it creates a vulnerability far worse than the original question. Because now the story isn't just about what the inquiry will or won't investigate, it's about whether the Prime Minister misrepresented a fellow Member of Parliament to avoid accountability. That is a story that doesn't go away quietly. This isn't just about one uncomfortable exchange in PMQs, it signals something about how this government intends to manage the grooming gang's inquiry going forward, through narrative control, through framing opponents as bad faith actors, and through avoiding the structural questions that survivors are demanding be answered. The consultation closes this Friday, the pressure is building, and moments like this one will define whether the public trusts this process or doesn't. Moments like this one rarely make the front pages, but they shape the direction of political accountability in this country. If you want to stay ahead of what's really happening inside Westminster, subscribe to UK Focus Point and never miss what the headlines leave out.